Hello and welcome to Inside the Pod, the podcast from the Processors and Growers Research Organisation. I'm Ben Pike and I'm joined today by my co-presenter Emily Scaife. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning.
And we've got a guest on today from BASF, and that's Iain Ford. Iain, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for the invitation to join you this morning.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on. Iain's joined us to talk a little bit about the new Pea Growth guide that has been issued by BASF in partnership with PGRO and ADAS. So we'll get to that shortly. But Iain, for those in the industry who are listening who perhaps don't know about you and BASF more generally as a company, do you want to just give us a broad overview of who you are, your role, and a bit about BASF within the pulse sector?
Yeah, certainly. My role is titled as Business Development Manager for BASF in the UK. And that's actually quite a wide-ranging role that covers several aspects, from technical support for one of our largest distributor customers in the UK to managing the technical development of our existing and pipeline products for particular crop areas, such as peas and beans, hence the conversation today. And BASF globally is one of the world's largest manufacturers of crop protection products. And we invest heavily in agricultural research and development, and spending over 900 million worth of euros on R&D for agricultural research in recent years. And this investment has resulted in a very strong global portfolio, which includes seeds and traits, chemical and biological crop protection, pest control, and even digital farming. And in the UK, we are again one of the major R&D manufacturers with a good history of bringing those new innovations, particularly in herbicides and fungicides, across all crop sectors. But we do have a strong focus on peas and beans as well.
Iain, could you tell us a little bit about some of the key products that our listeners might be familiar with?
Yeah, certainly. The main products from our portfolio that pea and bean growers will be most familiar with are likely to be the herbicides Nirvana and Bazagran SG, and the fungicide Signum. Nirvana, many people will be aware of it because it is the #1 pre-emergence herbicide that's used in peas and beans, and probably #1 because it controls such a wide range of both grass and broadleaf weeds. Complementary nature of the two active ingredients provide that broad spectrum control and also give good residual activity to control later germinators. Bazagran contains bentazone, which is one of the few post-emergence herbicides that are available for peas and beans. Been in the market for a long number of years, and it is under a watchful eye of the regulators at the moment, because we know that bentazone is highly soluble in water and has been found in ground and surface waters. So as an industry, we are under pressure to use Bazagran and other bentazone containing products in a responsible way to reduce that potential. And so everyone has a role to play in that to prevent and minimize the risk. And as part of that, BASF supports the cross-industry stewardship programme, which is aimed at promoting sustainable on-farm water stewardship through various activities, and also the development of management tools such as the new crop planning and bentazone IPM management tool that has just been launched this spring. And then Signum is well recognised as probably the leading fungicide for control of botrytis, which obviously means chocolate spot in beans and grey mould in peas, but also has good activity against rusts and other diseases in those crops. But the other aspect that people might not be as familiar with are the physiological effects that Signum can have on the crops. And recent studies that ADAS have carried out in both peas and beans have highlighted and confirmed how Signum can increase crop yields even in the absence of disease. And I think in a year like this, currently we're in a hot, dry situation, which is keeping a lid on disease pressure. Those physiological effects and the ability of Signum to reduce stress but still improve yields may well be a key benefit this year if disease pressure remains low.
Yeah, it's certainly had the weather isn't optimum for disease spread at the moment. So certainly the crops growing around where I am in the Midlands are looking fairly good at the moment. I was going to ask you a bit about the new pea growth guide in a moment, but just while we're on that topic, what's your take on how the pea and bean crops are looking in the UK at the moment from your sort of teams that are out in the fields and perhaps fields that you might have walked yourself? Are the crops in a reasonably good position?
Generally so, yes. I think probably as a rough general rule of thumb, the autumn sown winter bean crops are probably looking better because they've got established and got their roots down and are still in the moisture. Spring crops are probably a little bit and starting to become more variable because of this dry weather. And those that were drilled early, again, I think have got away and established quite well, some of those early spring beans. But maybe some of the peas that are sown that little bit later and around now, they'll be struggling because of lack of moisture just at the moment. So we could do with a splash of rain to give them a drink.
Yeah, well, we're recording this on the 1st of May, and there's not a huge amount of rain in the forecast, certainly for the next couple of weeks right here. So, but I think everyone will be crossing their fingers and hoping we see a little bit more moisture. But Iain, the main reason we invited you onto the show today was to talk about the new pea growth guide, which, as I mentioned, has been launched by BASF in partnership with ADAS and PGRO. I guess the obvious question is why? What is it that you're trying to do with this guide? What was its origin?
Yeah, the origin was very much around helping growers to improve consistency of yield across both peas and beans, because that inconsistency is something we've seen obviously many years, and it's frustrated many of us as to why that's happening and why that's the case. But it's probably not too surprising if you consider the relatively low level of investment that goes into UK focused pea and bean agronomy, especially when you compare it to something like cereals. So we felt there was a bit of a lack of basic agronomy information and crop physiology information out there. So that prompted us to collaborate with ADAS and PGRO to develop, well, in the first instance, we developed the Bean Growth Guide, which was published last year. And we've now moved on and done the same for peas and launched the Pea Growth Guide, as you say, just recently. And it's a freely available, comprehensive booklet that's designed to support growers to enhance the potential of their crops, as a basic summary.
And it draws on quite a number of sources of information. Obviously, the expertise that you will have, that PGRO's got, and ADAS has had input from the Yen, for example. So there's quite a body of knowledge that's been distilled into this document, I guess.
That's correct, yes. As you say, the guide does combine that vast experience and knowledge from both PGRO and ADAS, along with those latest findings from the PEN, as you mentioned, and also as well as results from those ADAS crop physiology studies that I referred to earlier. So the booklet provides an excellent and informative overview of the agronomy and the key management factors that contribute to high yields in peas. And as such, it's covering everything from cultivations and seed rates through nutrient management and disease control, as well as canopy expansion, light interception, yield formation and crop potentials. So it's a good source of information for both new and experienced growers.
Okay, Iain, would you mind telling us a little bit more about what the guide has identified as being the key drivers for boosting yields?
Yeah, certainly. I think this is one of the areas where the guide is very useful, because it's helped to identify those key components that drive the yield. And also then we can, from that, learn how to best improve them. So we see that unusually peas and beans are both sink and source limited, unlike a lot of other crops, which tend to be one or the other. And from that, it means that we need to encourage and look after the crop at various stages right throughout the life cycle, because the final yield is actually directly linked to the number of seeds per metre squared that we can gain from the crop, and obviously the size or weight of those seeds as well. So within those, we know that the number of seeds per metre squared depends on plant population, the number of shoots and the number of pods per shoot, all of which directly impact on that final number of seeds. And those factors are set relatively early in the crop's life through the establishment and early stem extension phase. So that time it's really important that actually growers think about getting the best seed bed possible to enable the crops to establish well, to enable the root systems to grow as large as possible, so that the root systems can provide and support those high biomass crops that we're trying to produce. But then conversely, when you look at the final seed size and seed weight, then that's influenced by photosynthesis shortly after flowering later on in the season. And so again, there's a need to focus at that time of the year, not only to reduce disease pressure through the use of fungicides, but also the use of fungicides like Signum that can have a greening effect on the crop, like I mentioned earlier, can significantly help to improve the photosynthetic rate of crops, which helps to improve the energy that's produced that can go towards filling those seeds and making a final yield that's more consistent. So there's a range of factors that growers can look at across the life cycle of the crop, really, that will have an important role in making sure that we get a suitable or a good yield at the end of the day.
You've got sections in the guide about diseases and weed control. Just for growers who haven't read the guide yet, what sort of information and advice have you got in there that they can learn around herbicide and fungicide applications?
There's very practical advice in the guide to help growers best use herbicides and fungicides to get the best control that's required. For example, if you consider herbicides, we obviously need to focus on the use of pre-ems because there's a lack of options available for post-ems. So there's information in the guide about how to get the best out of a pre-em, which relates back to having a good seedbed that's not too cloddy and the seed is sown to the right depth. Because a good seedbed not only will improve the seed to soil contact and improve germination and establishment, a good seedbed will also help to improve the efficacy and crop safety of the pre-em herbicides. And similarly, if you think about fungicides, the fungicides we have, particularly Signum and the others are on the market, they're all protectant in activity. So we need to be thinking about spraying right at the very start of disease infection, and that often coincides with early applications at early flowering. And taking that one stage further, the best results we've seen with regards to improvement in yield from not only disease control but physiological effects of things like Signum came from 2 applications of Signum, first at early flowering and second towards the end of flowering, and to get the best control of disease, prevention of disease and maintenance of that green leaf area to provide that photosynthetic activity to fill those seeds.
And where can people get their hands on it, Iain?
Yeah, it's available on our website, which is agricentre.basf.co.uk. And there you can either download a digital copy or request a physical copy to be posted out to you.
Moving on to looking at the pea and bean sector in general, how positive are you about the future? Are you hopeful that the demand for alternative proteins will rise? And how aware of that are you in your forward planning?
We're, yes, very aware of the challenges and issues around the pea and bean sector at the moment, but we are very positive about the future for those crops. And I think there's a number of drivers that is leading us to that positivity. First of which you mentioned about the increasing demand for homegrown proteins and the move away from imported soyas that can help to encourage the uptake of the crops. That there's continued investment in new utilization for peas and beans as alternative food sources, alternative protein sources to animal protein. And the government focus on environmental initiatives actually could well influence and help the pea and bean sector because of the benefits that these crops bring across the rotation as a whole and the benefits for the environment and soils. So I do think there's a good, strong future for these crops.
I mean, that's perhaps one of the main talking points in the industry at the moment is that sort of lack of clarity, I guess, around what the future holds with in relation to the SFI or whatever other environmental initiatives might come forward, and whether peas and beans are actually delivering the same or greater benefits already by virtue of a crop that growers can grow in a rotation. So I guess it's a bit of a difficult one to get our heads around whether peas and beans have got a really strong future or whether they are kind of under threat a little bit from the SFI, which we've seen from the numbers. It obviously has had a significant impact in the amount of crop that is planted as a result of those engaging in SFI schemes. But you feel sort of the two can work in tandem, or that the government will hopefully recognise some of the benefits that peas and beans bring, and reward growers in other ways for growing them. Iain, have you got any thoughts around that?
You're right. There is the conflict between things like SFI area and the area of peas and beans, and that puts pressure on the peas and beans crops. But hopefully, yes, the government might just shift the focus a little bit more to support that homegrown food and homegrown protein, as opposed to just encouraging an awful lot of growers to go into, for example, the legume cover crops or what it might be. That there are challenges to growing peas and beans, and you're right, we've seen a reduction in area following the introduction of the SFI options that are available. However, there's still, I think, a lot of indecision out there as to where that the area might grow. Whilst the SFI, whilst it was available, gave a guaranteed income, you may well have seen the recent work from AHDB, which suggested that even only a modest yield of even just under 2 tonne a hectare would still match the financial returns from an SFI legume fallow. So the hope is, yes, that maybe SFI things get tweaked to encourage growing of the feed crops rather than putting it into things like legume fallows. And that obviously then would benefit growers across the rotation, because we know that both peas and beans have a tremendous impact on not only following crops, but the rotation as a whole, and so can really help with farm profitability, particularly when you look across several years where the pea and beans are involved, as opposed to monocropping or simple cropping of wheat and barley.
Iain, when it comes to research and development, is there anything particular that you're focusing on at the moment, or are you looking at different areas in particular, such as biologicals? And is there anything exciting coming in the pipeline that you're allowed to tell us about?
Yeah, we're constantly looking across the range of either crop protection and biological products. And as you mentioned earlier, globally, we're very invested into seeds and traits and digital farming. But for us in the UK, we do have a strong pipeline of products coming down the line, and the nearest ones are actually going to be a new post-emergence herbicide that's on the way, and also a completely new insecticide, which is on the way. And both of those are currently going through the registration process.
How long do you think it'll be before we're allowed to say what they're called and get excited about them?
We'll have to wait until they're approved before we can actually give you a product name as to what they're called. But hopefully within the next few years, we're expecting these to come through.
I think that was a vague enough answer to keep you out of hot water there, Iain. Well done. It's always a challenge to sort of keep growers updated and invested in what you're bringing forward, along with not being able to say anything until everything's registered. So yeah, we appreciate the challenges around that. So we were wondering about the kind of difficulties of perhaps bringing these products to market, particularly when you've got a business case to justify, I guess, for some niche markets. And peas and beans are obviously a much smaller area than, say, a cereal fungicide or a cereal herbicide might be. How do you, as a company, kind of weigh up what's worth pursuing in terms of your development pipeline, and prioritizing your R&D investment, which while it's huge, you still have to focus on, I guess, on things that are going to bring about the most sales. So how do you sort of go about weighing those up?
Yeah, you're quite right. It is a big challenge, even though we do have a large investment in R&D, as you mentioned, and the figure I quoted was for global research. So we do have to fight for our share of that global R&D budget to fund the range of project ideas that we have. So probably the best way that we achieve that is by working closely with our European colleagues to build those strong business cases that can support product development for both Europe and UK markets. It's certainly a large area of focus to extend the range of crops that our active ingredients are used on. That helps to support their development, because we're working with existing active ingredients. It's obviously more challenging to develop specific new active ingredients that are just focused on peas and beans and no other crops. So there is a lot of that, what's called life cycle management, to utilize the portfolio that we have across as many crops and countries as possible.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Iain, and thanks for your time today talking to us about BASF, the company, but also the Pea Growth Guide, which is available, as Iain said earlier, at agricentre.basf.co.uk. Iain, I suspect there might be opportunities to come and see you and your team at events coming up in the next few months. Have you got any open days or events that you're attending where growers can come and talk to you about this guide and any products that you're bringing to market at the moment?
Yes, we've got a number of open days planned through the summer. The dates and days where they'll be available are on the website, and it will be great to welcome as many growers there as possible to chat to, see the demonstrations we have, and yes, talk about things like the Pea Guide that we have available.
Will you be at cereals?
We won't be at cereals, no, we won't have a stand there. We've not actually done cereals for a number of years. We've focused more recently on the local regional events and demonstration days that we organise.
Yeah, I think quite a few companies have gone down that route now, haven't they? So yeah, that's a sensible approach. Well, Iain, thanks again for your time. Much appreciated coming on here and telling us about your company and the guide, etc. And hopefully growers will look forward to seeing you at your open days during the summer.
Hopefully so, and thank you again for the opportunity to come and talk to you today.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Emily, for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode of Inside the Pod. If you've liked what you've heard, then please give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're using. It really does help us reach more people. So please do that if you will. The next episode will be out shortly, so hit the subscribe button and you'll be alerted as soon as we've got some new content for you. But until then, we'll look forward to seeing you soon. PGRO will be at cereals in June, and we've also got open days for peas and beans coming up. Dates and details are on pgro.org. Until then, thanks very much for joining us.